Constructed by Kawasaki in Kobe, Japan, I-4 was laid down on April 17, 1926. She was launched on May 22, 1928, and officially completed and commissioned on December 24, 1929. Upon commissioning, I-4 was assigned to the Yokosuka Naval District and placed under Submarine Division 7. Conflicting sources debate whether Submarine Division 7 was part of the Yokosuka Defense Division within the Yokosuka Naval District or attached to Submarine Squadron 2 in the 2nd Fleet, a unit of the Combined Fleet. On August 1, 1930, when Submarine Division 8 was formed, I-4 and her sister ship I-3 were transferred to the new division. On December 1, 1930, Submarine Division 8 began serving with Submarine Squadron 1 in the 1st Fleet, also part of the Combined Fleet. The division was reassigned to the Yokosuka Defense Division on October 1, 1931, but by December 1, 1931, it was back with Submarine Squadron 1 in the 1st Fleet. During an exercise off Kyushu near the Mishima Islands on June 14, 1932, I-4 unexpectedly surfaced in front of battleships as submarines practiced a mock attack. The battleship Hyuga, traveling at 12 knots, narrowly avoided a collision, though her bow lightly grazed I-4's hull, causing minor damage to Hyuga's plating. Submarine Division 8 completed its assignment with Submarine Squadron 1 on October 1, 1932, and was reassigned to the Yokosuka Defense Division in the Yokosuka Naval District. However, it returned to duty with Submarine Squadron 1 in the 1st Fleet on November 15, 1933. On March 29, 1935, I-4 departed from Sasebo, Japan alongside other vessels of Submarine Squadron 1, I-1, I-2, and I-3 from Submarine Division 7, and I-5 and I-6 from Submarine Division 8 for a training cruise in Chinese waters. The 6 submarines completed their cruise and returned to Sasebo on April 4, 1935. On November 15, 1935, Submarine Division 8 was once again reassigned to the Yokosuka Defense Division, and on that same day, I-4 was placed in reserve. Submarine Division 8 resumed service with Submarine Squadron 1 in the 1st Fleet on December 1, 1936. On March 27, 1937, I-4 left Sasebo accompanied by I-1, I-2, I-3, I-5, and I-6, for a training exercise near Qingdao, China. The 6 submarines completed their training cruise and arrived at Ariake Bay on April 6, 1937. On July 7, 1937, the Marco Polo Bridge incident occurred, marking the start of the Second Sino-Japanese War. In September 1937, Submarine Squadron 1 was reassigned to the 3rd Fleet, which was then subordinated to the China Area Fleet for operations in Chinese waters. The squadron, consisting of I-1, I-2, I-3, I-4, I-5, and I-6, deployed to a base in Hong Kong along with the submarine tenders Choge and Taige. From Hong Kong, the submarines supported Japan's blockade of China and conducted patrols along China's central and southern coasts. Between the 20th or 21st, sources differ, and August 23, 1937, all 6 submarines operated in the East China Sea, providing distant cover for an operation in which the battleships Nagato, Mutsu, Haruna, and Kirishima, along with the light cruiser Isuzu, transported troops from Tadotsu, Japan to Shanghai, China. Submarine Squadron 1 remained stationed in Hong Kong until the fall of 1938. To ease international tensions surrounding the conflict in China, Japan withdrew its submarines from Chinese waters in December 1938. Submarine Division 8 was placed into 3rd Reserve within the Yokosuka Naval District on November 15, 1939. The division was reassigned on November 15, 1940, to Submarine Squadron 2 in the 6th Fleet, part of the Combined Fleet. On January 7, 1941, I-4 became the flagship of Submarine Division 8. She was briefly placed in reserve from October 19th to October 31st. By November 10, 1941, Submarine Division 8 consisted of I-4, I-5, I-6, and I-7, with I-7 serving as the squadron flagship. Vice Admiral Mitsumi Shimizu, Commander-in-Chief of the 6th Fleet, convened the commanding officers of the fleet's submarines aboard his flagship, the light cruiser Katori, anchored in Saki Bay. During this meeting, his Chief of Staff briefed them on the upcoming attack on Pearl Harbor, which would mark Japan's entry into World War II against the United States. As the Imperial Japanese Navy prepared for the Pacific conflict, I-4, I-5, I-6, and I-7 departed Yokosuka on November 16, 1941, heading for the Hawaiian Islands. On December 2, 1941, the submarines received the message "Climb Mount Niitaka 1208" from the combined fleet, signaling that war with the Allies would begin on December 8, 1941 Japan time, December 7, 1941 in Hawaii due to the international dateline. On December 7, 1941, the submarines of Submarine Squadron 2 assumed patrol stations across the Pacific Ocean, northeast to northwest of Oahu, with I-4's patrol area adjacent to I-6's. Their orders were to conduct reconnaissance and attack any ships leaving Pearl Harbor during or after the attack, which took place that morning. At approximately 03:55 on December 14, 1941, I-4 struck the starboard side of the 4,858-ton Norwegian merchant ship Hugh Merchant with a torpedo, 29 nautical miles east-northeast of Makapu'u Point, Oahu. Hugh Merchant, en route from San Francisco to Manila with 7,500 tons of general cargo, including 100 tons of explosives, had been diverted to Honolulu when the war broke out. The ship caught fire, and at around 04:05, I-4 fired a second torpedo, hitting near the same spot. Hugh Merchant sank at 05:33, with the United States Navy destroyer minesweeper USS Trevor rescuing her passengers and crew. In the following days, oil barrels from Hugh Merchant's cargo washed ashore on Kauai. On January 9, 1942, I-4 was directed to divert from her patrol to search for the U.S. Navy aircraft carrier USS Lexington, which had been sighted by the submarine I-18. But she failed to locate Lexington. I-4 arrived at Kwajalein on January 22, 1942, and then departed on January 24, 1942, heading for Yokosuka, where she arrived on February 2, 1942. While I-4 was at Yokosuka, Submarine Squadron 2, consisting of I-1, I-2, I-3, I-4, I-6, and the squadron flagship I-7, was assigned to the Dutch East Indies Invasion Force on February 8, 1942. Consequently, I-4 departed Yokosuka on February 12, 1942, bound for Palau, arriving there on February 16, 1942. She set out again on February 17th, heading for the Netherlands East Indies. I-4 reached Staring Bay on the southeast peninsula of Celebes near Kendari on February 22, 1942, before departing on February 23 to begin her second war patrol in the Indian Ocean south of Java. Around 16:15 on February 28, 1942, I-4 sank an unidentified Allied steamship in the Indian Ocean southwest of Bali, possibly the Singapore-based Dutch merchant vessel Ban Ho Guan, though some sources suggest Ban Ho Guan was not in the area at the time. On March 3, 1942, she bombarded the Cocos Islands and concluded her patrol with her arrival at Penang, in Japanese-occupied British Malaya at 12:50 Japan Standard Time, on March 8, 1942. Orders from Combined Fleet Headquarters directed all submarines of Submarine Squadron 2 except I-1 to conduct reconnaissance along the Ceylon coast and western coast of India in preparation for Operation Sea, the forthcoming Indian Ocean raid by the Combined Fleet's mobile force carriers. Following these orders, I-4 departed Penang on March 28, 1942, with the commander of Submarine Division 8 aboard, tasked with conducting reconnaissance in the Indian Ocean, specifically around the 8-degree channel and off the coast of Colombo, Ceylon. At the western entrance of 8-degree Channel around 1555 on April 6, 1942, the day after Japanese carrier planes raided Colombo, I-4 launched two Type 96 torpedoes at the American 6,617-ton steamer Washingtonian, which was en route from Suez, Egypt, to Colombo. Washingtonian spotted one torpedo on her port side about 500 yards away and began a slow turn to evade it, but both torpedoes struck, igniting her fuel tanks. The ship was soon engulfed in flames and developed a 25-degree list to port. Her crew of 29 and 2 passengers abandoned ship by 16:05, and Washingtonian eventually sank. On April 10, 1942, shortly after 0100, I-4 surfaced off Colombo and fired both deck guns at a 200-ton Maldivian Buggalo, delivering 1,440mm rounds and severely damaging the vessel. I-4 concluded her patrol with her arrival in Singapore on April 16, 1942. She departed Singapore on April 21, 1942, and proceeded to Yokosuka, arriving there on May 1, 1942. While I-4 was stationed at Yokosuka, the Aleutian Islands campaign began with a Japanese air raid on Dutch Harbor, Alaska, on June 3 and 4, 1942, followed by the unopposed Japanese occupation of Attu on June 5 and Kiska on June 7, 1942. On June 10, 1942, I-1, I-2, I-3, I-4, I-5, I-6, and I-7 were reassigned to the Northern Force for operations in the Aleutians. I-4 departed for Aleutian waters on June 11, 1942, alongside I-1, I-2, I-3, and I-7 to begin her fourth war patrol. On June 20, 1942, I-1, I-2, and I-4 joined the K patrol line in the North Pacific. I-4 remained on patrol until July 3, 1942. Reassigned to the advance force on July 20, 1942, she was ordered to return to Japan, arriving at Yokosuka on August 1, 1942, where she began an overhaul. During I-4's time at Yokosuka, the Guadalcanal campaign commenced on August 7, 1942, with U.S. amphibious landings on Guadalcanal, Tulagi, Florida Island, Gavutu, and Tanambogo in the southeastern Solomon Islands. On August 20, 1942, Submarine Division 8 was disbanded, and I-4 was reassigned to Submarine Division 7. She departed Yokosuka on September 8, 1942, bound for the Solomons War Zone. After a stop at Truk from September 15 to 19, 1942, she embarked on her fifth war patrol, assigned to patrol south of San Cristobal. On September 29, 1942, I-4 was on the surface 12 nautical miles southwest of Cape Sydney, San Cristobal, when at 2300 she spotted the 7,447-ton U.S. Navy cargo ship USS Alhena on her port bow, heading east-southeast at 13 knots, escorted by the destroyer USS Monson. I-4 submerged and began her approach at 5 knots. At 23:44, she launched two Type 96 torpedoes at Alhena, and at 23:51, the first torpedo struck Alhena's stern near her number 5 hold, blasting a 45-foot hole on both sides and igniting fires. The second torpedo also hit but failed to explode. Alhena lost power and developed a 10-degree list to stern. Believing the ship would sink, I-4 descended to 165 feet and began exiting the area at 3 knots, breaking contact with Monson at 0:25 on September 30th. At 0:47, her sound operator detected another destroyer, but I-4 soon lost contact. She surfaced at 0:145 and reported at 0:432 that she had sunk a 7,000-ton cargo ship. However, despite the loss of 6 U.S. Navy and 24 U.S. Marine Corps personnel, Alhena stayed afloat and was later refitted as an attack cargo ship, returning to combat in mid-1943. On October 5, 1942, I-4 was reassigned to the A Patrol Group. On October 10, 1942, she and I-7 were placed directly under the advance force, and I-4 was ordered to divert from her patrol to the Espiritu Santo area, where a submarine-launched raid was planned. However, the raid was canceled, and I-4 was reassigned to the A Patrol Group on October 13, 1942. On October 14, she received orders to bombard the airfield on Espiritu Santo, but limited visibility as she approached from the east prevented her from locating the target. On October 16, she was directed to patrol the waters between the Solomon Islands and the New Hebrides. On October 25, 1942, while 100 nautical miles west of Espiritu Santo, she sighted a westbound battleship, likely USS Washington, accompanied by 2 destroyers, but lost them in a rain squall and did not engage. I-4 returned to Truk on November 3, 1942. While at Truk between November 4 and 16, 1942, I-4 underwent a conversion, replacing her aft 140mm gun with a mount behind the conning tower for a waterproof Daihatsu-class landing craft, enabling her to deliver cargo along Solomon Islands coastlines. She was reassigned to the B Patrol Unit on November 15, 1942. As her conversion neared completion, Vice Admiral Teruhisa Komatsu, commander of the 6th Fleet, held a meeting on November 16, 1942, to inform the submarine commanders that Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, commander-in-chief of the combined fleet, had ordered the 6th Fleet to organize submarine supply runs to support the 17th Army forces fighting on Guadalcanal. Assigned to supply missions, I-4 departed Truk on November 20, 1942, bound for Rabaul. She stopped at Rabaul from November 23 to 25, 1942, where she embarked a waterproof Daihatsu on her new mount, then continued to Shortland Island in the Shortland Islands. While off Bougainville, her commanding officer received a briefing on Guadalcanal supply procedures. I-4 arrived at Shortland on November 26, 1942. Carrying her Daihatsu, she departed on November 28 with 20 tons of food and medicine, reaching Camimbo Bay on Guadalcanal's northwest coast on November 30, 1942. She swiftly unloaded and returned to Rabaul, arriving on December 3, 1942. On December 5 at 1600, she began another supply run to Guadalcanal, delivering another 20 tons of food and medicine to Camimbo Bay on December 8. After a brief stop at Shortland from December 10 to 12, she continued to Rabaul, arriving on December 14, 1942. On December 16, 1942, I-4 departed Rabaul on an urgent supply mission to Buna, New Guinea, to support Japanese forces in the New Guinea campaign. She arrived off the mouth of the Mambare River on New Guinea's coast at 22:15 on December 18, 1942. While on the surface, she was detected by U.S. Navy PT boats PT-121 and PT-122, which fired 2 torpedoes at her, both missing but forcing her to withdraw. I-4 returned to the area a few hours later but failed to establish contact with Japanese forces ashore. Her commanding officer then transmitted a message indicating his decision to abort the supply mission and return to Rabaul. On December 21, 1942, the submarine USS Seadragon, alerted to I-4's presence by ultra-intelligence, spotted I-4 at the southern entrance to St. George's Channel, about 20 nautical miles from Rabaul. I-4 was traveling north on the surface at 14 knots and was sighted at 06:21. Seadragon mistakenly identified her as an I-168 class submarine, noting she was painted black with the number 4 on her conning tower. At 06:37, Seadragon launched 3 Mark 10 Mod 3 torpedoes from a range of 850 yards. I-4's lookouts likely spotted the incoming torpedoes as she turned to avoid them. Seadragon's first torpedo missed due to a gyroscope failure, while the second detonated prematurely after 18 seconds. The third torpedo, however, struck I-4's stern, creating a large explosion and heavy smoke. Seadragon observed I-4's bow rising vertically as she sank stern first, resulting in the loss of all 90 crew members. On January 5, 1943, the Imperial Japanese Navy officially declared I-4 presumed lost with all hands near Rabaul. She was removed from the Navy list on March 1, 1943.